This book is split into 3 parts, called First Life, Second Life, insert another video game joke here, and Third Life. First Life ends with more Capucin ships raining down on Ket, spelling its doom. Second Life starts 63 years later. The Ellimist is now the captain of the MC, which houses the last surviving Ketrans as they search for a new home. The MC has evolved. The Ketrans reverse engineering alien technology they stumble upon to improve it. Basically, it's like a potentially good version of Star Trek Voyager happened between Chapter 12 and Chapter 13, which is nicer than saying a total ripoff of Battlestar Galactica. The surviving Ketrans have adapted best they could, got used to being in enclosed spaces, but the one thing they won't settle on is becoming surface-dwelling creatures. Well, guess what? Planets with floating internet crystals aren't that common in the cosmos. It had become an unwritten rule for our strange, cut-off, castaway civilization that we would bring no new life into being till we had a home. Yeah, that's how you ensure your species' survival. Granted, we know fuck all about Ketran biology, how long they live, how long they're sexually viable, if they produce one offspring at a time or produce litters, but it seems to me that every day you guys don't just get it on already is another day closer to total extinction. Plus, how else are you going to get new crew members to run the ship? Maybe this stubbornness is the point, because today is the day the Ketran race becomes extinct. The MC approaches a planet consisting mostly of ocean, which doesn't do them any good, but Aguela picks up weird signals from under the water and suggests they go check it out. There's a lot of bickering and politics among the chain of command that I won't get into here because they're all about to die. The Ellimist and Aguela take a small recon ship down to check it out, only to get grabbed by something Lovecraftian. The MC flies into the atmosphere to check it out, and it too gets grabbed. And so we meet Father. Father is a giant sponge monster who covers the entire ocean of this planet. He grabs whatever aliens come to check this place out, attaches their bodies to himself, and adds their consciousness to his own, even if the body is dead. Now, every single Ketran from the MC is stuck to Father, and all but the Ellimist are dead. Father spends his time either torturing the Ellimist with images of the people he's lost, or forcing the Ellimist to play games with him. Father has a huge library of games lifted from the memories of all these aliens, and the reason he's keeping the Ellimist alive is because he's the best opponent Father's come across in his eons of existence. If it seems like I'm rushing over this stuff, it's because the book is. The entire first half of this book is taking up with the First Life story. The Ketran stuff was clearly what Kay Applegate was most interested and invested in. The Ellimist Chronicles might have fared better if it was a trilogy of full-length books, one for each life. But of course that probably wouldn't have flown with Scholastic. In fact, this is the shortest of the Chronicles books. So we get summary paragraphs of the Ellimist spending centuries kept alive and forced to play games against Father. Always losing, never dying. We do get our first actual tangible connection to the rest of the Animorphs series, where we learn that one of the species Father has absorbed is the Skritnaw. But this is just a cameo and doesn't teach us anything new about the race. Oh shit, the Skritnaw Chronicles. That might have been fun too. The intergalactic war through the eyes of a band of spacefaring con artists. Anyway, the Skritnaw had kidnapped an alien called an Unamite, and with the Unamite comes a new game for Father and the Ellimist to play. It's essentially Battle of the Bands. Father makes a musical composition, then the Ellimist, and a crowd determines the winner. Father is a mega brain and takes the technical aspects to music easily, but the Ellimist sees an opening and deliberately plays awful to lull Father into a false sense of security. They play the game a few more times, the Ellimist pretends to suck, and then finally delivers his finishing move. It was Aguela who was in my thoughts as I raised the Edge's mouthpiece to my lips. It was Aguela who made the music possible for me, and the lack of an Aguela, or anything like her, that would doom poor Father. You needed love to win at the game of music. I played a riff. The audience sat forward. That's right, Father. I've rewritten the rules. I played of sadness. I played of loneliness, despair, love found and lost. I played of tragic misunderstanding and wary cynicism and defeat. I played of perseverance, endurance beyond all suffering, endurance in the face of hopelessness, hope when even hope was a betrayal. My ad spoke of every terrible moment of my life. It spoke of the loss of my people, the loss of friends, losses and losses. And yet, though I played so much sadness, the music at the same time denied despair. How could anyone despair while music was being played? I could see it in the Unamite faces. They heard the loneliness, and in that expression of loneliness, found comfort for their own. Oh, yes, I had them. I owned them, the audience. I had them through, and they would go with me wherever my ads led them. And Father? Oh, it was sweet to see him. Sweet to watch his uneasiness turn to amazement, turn to sullen anger. The music didn't touch him, but he could see that I had won. I had won the game so resoundly, so finally, that he could never hope to compete with me again. Not at the game of music.
Oh no, I've been defeated by the smooth sound of jazz.
Father should consider himself lucky he didn't absorb Charles Mingus. He would have blown Father's brains out. The power of jazz not only defeats Father in this game, but opens the Ellimist's eyes to the possibilities of intuition and improvisation, and he starts beating Father all the time. The Ellimist figures Father will finally kill him, but instead Father spends more and more time sulking and pouting away. Finally, the Ellimist sees an opening and somehow starts absorbing the brains attached to Father, starting with Aguella, which might have been more emotional if Aguella had been a character at all. I'm sorry, I can't get over this. Aguella is one of the most proppiest love interests Animorphs has ever produced. So the Ellimist absorbs minds, collecting their knowledge and memories, and before Father realizes what's going on, the Ellimist already has a majority of them. It turns out the personality of Father is just an amalgamation of thousands of individuals, and without them, Father is nothing more than a sea sponge. This is the end of Second Life. Ding! Turn tape over to begin Third Life. Free of Father, the Ellimist and his new collective brain swim to the surface and fly to a large island where Father has stashed all the various crass spaceships, and he spends the next 30 years mixing and matching all the parts to construct a super-duper ultra spaceship with a computer he can plug himself into and further extend his mind. The ship becomes an extension of his identity, as much the Ellimist as the ancient, squishy, organic Ketron in the center of it all. The Ellimist flies around, and the first thing he does is stop a war between two planets by putting asteroid debris between them. After that, he decides that since he has the power, he might as well become the galaxy's personal nanny, and spends the next couple of millennia trying to make small, almost unnoticeable changes to various worlds and special events to reduce conflict and suffering. While he's not at his full power yet, this is when the Ellimist's godhood effectively begins. However, as an amateur god, there is always room for mistakes, and when he returns to those two warring planets, he discovers that he accidentally gave a huge advantage to one of them, resulting in the extinction of the other. While looking over the devastation, someone new appears. Then he showed himself to me. I saw with a shock that he was like me, as much machine as biological, but his biology was entirely different. He was evolved for the surface, or perhaps even for a subterranean life. No wings could ever lift those massive, muscled limbs, and no creature with that single, dominating red eye could ever navigate easily in 3 dimensions. I am called Krayak. Of course, that's just my game name. He laughed a knowing laugh, a ridiculing, belittling sound. Krayak's much more well-spoken than the rest of the series would have you believe. He reveals that he's been quietly going around reversing a lot of the good work the Ellimist has been doing. If we're still sticking with the video game analogy, then Krayak is a griefer. He's the guy who steals your kill in League of Legends, blows up your house in Minecraft, and camps the spawn zones in Call of Duty. And now, having been freshly kicked out of his galaxy by an even more powerful being, he looks to pick on the Ellimist, possibly the most powerful being this galaxy has to offer. The way he does this is to put the Ellimist in no-win situations, where he has to choose between Species A or Species B. It's like the game the Joker plays on The Dark Knight, only on a more cosmic scale. By the way, Krayak first shows up in Chapter 22. There are 29 chapters. That's how long it takes to get to something that feels remotely relevant to the rest of the series. So the Ellimist chases Krayak around the galaxy, trying to stop him, playing his games, and not really getting anywhere. Not even Jazz seems to help. Charles Mingus wouldn't have had this problem. He'd have punched Krayak in the face on the first sour note. Eventually, the Ellimist just gives up. Well, he says he stops following Krayak to devise a new way to stop him, but really, he gives up. He flies his ship as far away from Krayak as possible, finds a nice little out-of-the-way planet of pre-industrial lifeforms, clones the body of one of them, and downloads part of his consciousness into the body to mingle with the indigenous folk. The species? Andalites. Really, this part, 5 chapters from the end of the book, makes the best case for its existence as part of the Animorphs series. We get to see the Andalites in their tribal days, which is certainly a trip. You get so used to Andalites being the technological rulers of the galaxy that it's surreal to see them living in huts, having barely mastered fire. Also, the Andalites didn't have ThoughtSpeak yet, instead communicating through sign language. It takes a bit for the Ellimist to earn the trust of the Andalites, but eventually he becomes part of the tribe, marries, and has children, 3 out of 5 of which die of disease. This gives the Ellimist the answer he was looking for. Instead of trying to stop Krayak, the Ellimist will create new life to replace that which is lost. Or, in other words, you're all fucked, but don't worry, I'm digging through my old Pokemon fan art folder to find things to replace you. Also, doesn't this mean that the Skritna are like millions of years more advanced than the Andalites, or at least should be? How did that happen? The Ellimist returns to his cyborg spaceship body and starts going to barren worlds and introducing life. We get a few sentences about him creating the Pemalites, and then he runs into Krayak again, who's opted to destroy the Ellimist now. However, the Ellimist has one-upped him by spreading his consciousness among dozens of smaller ships spread out across the galaxy, some hiding away in Z-space, making it impossible to kill him all at once. This gives the Ellimist a new advantage, and a furious battle rages across space, destroying hundreds of systems and civilizations caught in the crossfire. It looks like the Ellimist might win, but Krayak lays a trap and tricks a portion of the Ellimist to fall into a black hole. Ha! The joke's on you, Krayak. That wasn't even the Ellimist's final form. We all know that in science fiction, black holes are magic, so this doesn't kill the Ellimist. Even after Krayak destroys the rest of his parts in regular and Z-space, the Ellimist remains conscious, somehow capable of observing not only the universe, but the lines of space and time and their intersections. In fact, none of the tech wizardry the Ellimist did in the last 27 chapters seems to matter. The Ellimist could have literally done nothing before this point. How did I get my powers? Well, I did some stuff and then I fell into a black hole. That's it. Oh, maybe that's why the Ellimist saved teenage Chapman from falling into a black hole in the Untitled Chronicles. He didn't want the competition. It certainly wasn't that he has a greater role to play excuse he gave. Now, of course, there's more to an origin story than how one got one's powers, but the Ellimist has been so vague and mysterious before this point that you could have literally written any kind of character you wanted as long as it ended with, and then I fell into a black hole and it gave me god powers. The Ellimist could just as easily have been a minor space criminal, a mother searching for her lost astronaut child, a microscopic organism, or 7 sentient pies, as long as they fall into a black hole at the end. That's disappointing, because while I have plenty of issues with execution, I do like the idea of this do-it-yourself godhood, of a total schmuck becoming a deity by his own hands. but now all that work he did was pretty much irrelevant. What I don't understand is why the Ellimist doesn't eliminate Krayak once he grasps his new abilities. During their giant space war, it was said that the Ellimist was just edging out the Krayak in terms of power, and now the Ellimist is able to manipulate the fates themselves. His hands run over the threads of time like the Moirai in Greek mythology, while all indications seem to be that Krayak never rises above angry dude in powerful spaceship. He should be able to wish Krayak into the cornfield at this point. Instead, he opts to continue the game, making himself known just before the Krayak is about to destroy prehistoric Earth. The blue planet teemed with life. The dominant species type were huge, brutish beasts in a fantastic array of forms. Giant, slow-moving plant eaters and violent killers with tearing teeth and deadly talons. There was intelligence there, but no sentience. I could see it so clearly. Not in the great domineering brutes, but in a handful of small, swift, fur-bearing prey animals did the future of this world lie. Also, there are these peaceful crab people, but you know what? Fuck them. Remind me to send somebody back in time to deal with them. So instead of wiping Krayak off the map, the Ellimist proposes a game. One that'll take millions of years to play and destroy countless lives. I said it since his first appearance, the Ellimist is kind of a shit. Post-book follow-up. Again, I say with strong emphasis, I don't hate this book, and I can totally see what draws people to it, but it's totally insubstantial to the rest of the series. In fact, I'd say it's harmed in having to connect itself to Animorphs. There are times when it feels like it's dragging its feet, not really wanting to get to the Krayak. It's clear that Kay Applegate had so much fun writing about the Ketrans that it seems like she'd have rather written a standalone novel than something tied to Animorphs. The Ketrans are an interesting race, but I don't think the book goes far enough in explaining their alien culture, because they would totally have been an alien culture. They live on floating crystals and connect their minds to a naturally forming internet. Well, more often than not, Applegate opts to make their personalities human that can fly. A few nouns are turned into garbage syllables, but otherwise they lifted a plot out of Degrassi. So what do we learn about the Ellimist after all this? That he sees things in terms of game systems, games that he's very bad at playing? It takes him an eon to discover improvisation, and several more to realize that creating life is as viable an option as ending life. In short, he's really slow on the uptake. He's full of self-doubt, and empathy comes hard to him. Not the most inspiring of omnipotent beings out there. Not that it had to be inspiring, just that you aren't left with a sense of awe as you might expect. The book ends just as the proper game between Ellimist and Krayak begins, which means that any of the real questions you might have had about the conflict are left unanswered. For example, why did the Ellimist create the Time Matrix? The Time Matrix is one of the most important MacGuffins in the series, and it's never brought up. Also, no Drode. The book does help make the Animorphs universe seem larger, and sell us on the Earth-Year conflict being a very tiny part of a larger game. But a lot of the universe building is just Kay Applegate listing off a bunch of alien names we've never heard of before, without describing their physical appearances and culture. That's not universal. There are a few exceptions, and even some of the species are described in more detail than the Ketrans. But when 90% of the aliens named have this race was mentioned in the Ellimist Chronicles as their entry in the Animorphs wiki, that's not really substantial universe building. If Animorphs was a box of toys, then most of the toys introduced in this book would be sitting on a shelf somewhere, unopened. Pretty to look at, but if you're not going to play with them, then why did you buy them? Really, I could ramble on for hours and hours, but to sum up, the Ellimist Chronicles has some fun ideas that might have worked better in a standalone separate book. It offers little to Animorphs, and its connections to Animorphs are either strained or insubstantial. It's a story that didn't need to be told, and it wasn't told as well as it could have been. I give the Ellimist Chronicles a 4 out of 10.